Hi, I'm Marissa Elkins. I'm one of the commission members. We are without our administrator, so I'm going to call the meeting to order and call the roll. Bill Newman.
Here.
Felicia Lundquist.
Present.
Garrick Perry.
Here.
Oh, he's here. Good. Jeremy Baker Paquette. I'm here, Marissa Elkins. Marsha Morris.
Here.
Usman Power Green. Not here yet. Renika Montgomery Tumaklo.
Here.
I'll get it without stuttering eventually. Sarah Lynn Patterson.
Present.
Rachel Naismith.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Excellent. So happy to have our meeting starting today, April the 2nd. We're super excited for the lineup today. We're especially excited because we have two special guests, Mayor Shara of Northampton, and also the City Council President, Alex Jarrett. We have quite a few items to discuss, and the first thing is to discuss the recently voted upon change to our commission name. There is a process, I believe, that we might need to go through to,
Is public comment?
No, we moved it to the bottom because we have our two special guests. So yeah, we're going to open with this conversation about the new name and really raise the question again for any of the members of the commission who would like to respond. So currently we have a very technical name, right? It kind of just reflects what we do, which we are just investigating the nature of Black life here in Northampton, past and present. A lot of us felt like the name reflected a sort of gravitas that might make some folks uncomfortable in different ways. And so we were interested in using a new title for ourselves, and that was the Northampton Reparations Study Commission. And so I just wanted to open the floor to our mayor and to our city councilor to share any thoughts that they might have about the nature of our self-naming practices, or your response to the name itself and what it might engender for the public. You're welcome to join us at the.
Okay, please.
Yeah, we'd love that.
I just can't see you both where I was sitting. So.
And then you could share a mic.
Yeah, these are pretty sensitive, so I should have more than
If we can just stop for just a minute though. So the posted agenda does have public comment next. Are you taking things out of order? I mean, it's okay. I think that's allowed. I just want to make sure that we are clear on.
Well, the agenda that I sent specifically had public comments at the bottom, so it must have been reversed, and that's fine. If the mayor and Alex Jarrett doesn't mind, we will go ahead with public comments since that's what's on our agenda.
It's fine with me.
All right.
It's fine.
So we would love to open the floor to public comments. Anyone in the Zoom chat room and anyone in person may speak and address us.
Hello, I'm Andrea Reber, and I am a member of the racial justice team at the Unitarian Society, which is right there. And our congregation has been focusing on anti-racism work for the past 5 or 6 years, more recently reparations in particular. And we are hosting a documentary film called The Cost of Inheritance on April 26th at 6:30 to 8 p.m., Friday, April 26th. And it's the first public screening in Northampton. It was shown in Springfield back in February. And here's a little bit about it. The Cost of Inheritance, an America Reframed special. It's an hour-long documentary that explores the complex issue of reparations in the United States using a thoughtful approach to history, historical injustices, systemic inequities, and the critical dialogue on racial conciliation. Through personal narratives, community inquiries, and scholarly insights, it aims to inspire an understanding of the scope and rationale of the reparations debate. And I'll add that in the movie, 2 white families discover that their ancestors were enslavers. So they embark on a healing journey to find the descendants of those people that were enslaved by their ancestors and to find ways to make restitution to them. It's an hour-long film, and it will be followed by a Q&A led by the three of us, Tom, John, and me, the members of the Northampton Reparations Committee that brought forward the resolution. And we invite all of you to attend, come see the film, listen to the questions and comments from the public. And it would be an opportunity for you to share something about your work on this commission, if you choose, only if you choose. So, thank you.
Thank you so much, Andrea Reaver.
Yes.
Emma Khan, Sudan.
Oh, yes. Hi, I'm Mimikan Sudan. I'm a former member of the Sojourner Truth Memorial Statue Committee. I helped set up the Scholarship Fund for Social Justice, and currently I'm a member of the David Ruggles Committee. And previously, way back, I was under the I was a commissioner that helped start the Cable Advisory Board and also Northampton Open Media under the mayor at the time, Claire Higgins. And one thing that I noticed while I was a commissioner, that we had at least 4 separate hearings, public hearings, where we had people come in and give their feedback. We got input from the senior citizens, high school kids, and so forth around the community, which helped us get the information that we needed to create the, at the time it was Northampton Community Television, now it's Northampton Open Media. And I would suggest that also to the current committee here that's looking into reparations, to have open hearings to the public, to get some public input. One thing that I wanted to do, and I had talked to Usman about it, unfortunately he's not here now, is a proposal that I can read to you. It says, "Be it known that in keeping with the original thinking back at the end of the Civil War and slavery, that each former slave families were offered 40 acres and a mule. Well, today, due to modernization and growth, that is not a feasible option. My proposal, therefore, would be for the city and town of Northampton to create a fund for first-time home buyers of people of African American descent, to give them a leg up by funding the 10% down payment, not the total cost of the house, but the 10% down payment of a new or previously existing home, as well as paying for all the closing costs incurred during the transaction." Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, John Berkowitz, Northampton. I just wanted to celebrate, and in case you hadn't heard, just on the news the other day, that the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, called for and supported reparations for the transatlantic slave trade. I don't know if he put it out as a proposal beyond that, but just to have somebody of his level say, internationally known level, that this is an important thing. I plan to look it up more and find out more about what he said and anything he's written about it. And secondly, I just learned about a new book that I'm going to look so I don't mess up the title, Reparations and Reparatory Justice, Past, Present, and Future, by the authors Sundiata Chahua and Mary Frances Berry. And I want to just add, I learned about this from my friend Alan, who is a property owner here in Northampton and lived here a long time ago, but now lives in New Hampshire. And He is the author of a timeline, historical timeline, about reparations initiatives throughout American history, both payments of reparations as well as federal, state, local initiatives like Northampton's. And his timeline was included in that book, along with plenty of other essays and articles by a number of different authors. So I was very glad to see that. Can't wait to read it. Just letting you know it's out there. Thank you.
Tom Weiner, you're acknowledged.
Yeah, this is a quick one. I've been getting requests from people. Latest one was Kathleen Anderson, who's very active in COBRA in Amherst, to find out what's going on with the commission. And so I've been trying to get hold of the minutes. And when I went the last ones I saw were January. I don't know if they've been updated in the last few days, but that was a serious concern, because I said to her, go look at the minutes, and then I realized that it's only a couple months ago that she could have seen them. So I'm asking if that can be something that's prioritized. That would be great. Thank you.
Any comments from the Zoom room? All right, so if there are no more comments,
Caroline
No.
Oppenheim.
Yeah, I'm sorry that I look like a ghost. I really don't understand why, why it's so strange, the picture, but anyway, I'm Carolyn Oppenheim from Northampton, and I was also on the team that worked to develop the commission. So I tell people there's a commission, I tell them what time. The time is very awkward for working people. Maybe you've been through this already and you know, but a lot of people that I've tried to get to go can't, because they're just getting out of work at 5 o'clock. So that's a consideration about that kind of public participation. And the other concern I have is this. We worked for almost 2 years, and during that time, we were able to follow what Amherst was doing, because they were about 2 years ahead of us. They had a Facebook page for their commission in progress, and you could sign up for that and find out all kinds of things that were going on. It seemed as if they used that as a tool to keep the public engaged. They also, I don't know if they had a website or not, but somehow they were able to get books, events that were happening related to the subject out there online, and that was very, very helpful. I had envisioned or hoped that maybe when you got somebody who does the administration for you, that you could put up a website. There were lots of people who signed the petition for this commission, and I bet a lot of people came to an event that we had in connection with Forbes, and I'll bet all those people would sign up and stay engaged and maybe come to meetings if there was a flow of information towards them, with links that they could look at and some basic books to read. So that's my suggestion. I feel there's a disconnect between this commission and the city. It's kind of in a black hole, and so that's it.
Thanks so much, Carolyn. Are there any more comments? Great, and just for an update, we have 17 attendees in person, in person and on Zoom in today's meeting. So our next item is to approve minutes, and we have minutes up for approval for 11/7, January and February of this year.
Sorry, point of order. The minutes would have needed to have been posted with the agenda, and they were not. I don't think we can vote on them.
So unfortunately, although I did send minutes from November January and February. For some reason, they weren't posted, so we can't answer Tom's request and Kathleen Anderson's request for these minutes. We will have them up next month, and we'll have a bunch that we will approve.
Yeah, I would explain to folks, we lost our administrator on short notice, and so we've admittedly been trying to get on top of this and get some of these posting things down, and I've been doing everything I can to help him do that, but I don't actually know all the intricacies of the things. I will before I will note that the mayor's office helped us out to make sure that this, at least the meeting and the agenda, was posted so that we didn't have any issues, at least meeting today. So thank you to the mayor and Annie Lesko, who helped us out. So.
Can I just, it's my understanding that you could give people draft minutes. Once they're created, they're public records. You just need to make the distinction that these are not approved minutes.
That's extremely helpful. So now we know. We've gotten quite a few requests, and so that means we can just send them via email.
I believe that that's right, that they don't need to be approved before you release them.
Well, not by email. We would post them. We can post them to the Racialized, the commission's webpage on the city.
But I can't individually send them to a person.
Well, you can send them to whoever you want, but for posting purposes and for the purposes of the easiest way for, I think, folks to access and be able to look for them, would be to get them posted.
I mean,
Yeah.
you could post the agenda for the next meeting and attach them there.
Yeah.
The drafts.
That was the part, is like, normally, we should have had an agenda, and since I helped facilitate that posting on Friday, I did not make that connection, but we can, to get them approved at the next agenda, we'll make sure not to just put the passing of meetings, but the specific meetings that we are passing and the attachments of the, so that anybody who wants to look at them can see the draft. So that's the posting requirement, but we can post on the city website for people to look at the draft. We just have to note that they're not approved yet.
And just a point of clarification, just so I make sure that I understand, to Sarah's point, we will also be able to email those with the agenda items to the commissioners. Is that accurate to say?
Oh, yeah, sure, yeah.
And I'll make sure I do that from now on. It's like send out the agenda plus all of that minutes in an email. Happy to do it. No problem. All right, so now we can return to the initial conversation that we proposed, which was just to discuss our name and what we want it to be. And I invite any commissioner to speak, as well as to begin with the mayor and the city council president with their thoughts.
Could you repeat the new name one more time, please?
Yes, so we agreed on the Northampton Reparations Study Commission.
I mean, I will defer to the counselors who wrote the resolution that brought forth this commission. I think they had a pretty extensive conversation around the name and around all that they wanted it to encapsulate. So, I'm happy to defer to them, and since they put in that work, and yeah.
Yeah, I mean, my role stepping in here, Jim Nash and Mayor Shara did the original work of together with the counselors to establish the commission. Now I'm stepping in, and my role I see as how can I support the commission, and there's does the and I would look in the original resolution there's it talks about the goals, and as long as the new name is in line with those goals, which it seems that it would be, that it seems like a good change.
And again, for points of clarification, the reason for the change is that folks, there was a misunderstanding in terms of current harms. Can we just discuss a little bit why the name change?
The motivation? So for one example, So in one example, there are folks who, and I'm speaking up guys on Zoom because other people in the room want to hear me clearly. There are folks who, for example, want us to co-sponsor an event, but the title of the commission has such gravitas that it seems as though we're walking around with a hammer, and it can make people feel uncomfortable. So if they see our name listed as a co-sponsor for a public event that has friendly relations at the center of it, it might make somebody nervous, whether or not they're racist, right? That's not really, why someone might feel uncomfortable is less important than the fact that it might make people feel uncomfortable. It might not, it might encourage them not to want to engage in the work that we're trying to do. Secondly, as far as I know, we are not, we don't hold any sort of jurisdiction or any sort of powers of jurisprudence to, handle certain types of complaints that might come our way. And we think that the title might invite that kind of contribution to this work, which is to say, I feel like someone committed an individual act that has affected me negatively, and we would point them in a certain direction, but we also just, in general, don't want to give people the impression that we are somehow inviting that sort of thing exclusively. Like our work is more in line with uncovering the history of Black people in the city, particularly as they have moved and progressed out of the institution of slavery, and looking at institutional harms and systemic harms, stuff like poverty rates and unemployment rates and other sorts of harms that are structural, and then allowing people who have individual harms, we're pointing them into the right direction of existing bodies like the Attorney General or the court system, or if there was a hate crime, the law enforcement bodies would handle that. And so we want to protect all the members of our community, and those are some of our motivations.
I guess I'm just we had the discussion, and while we didn't put it to a formal vote, I thought that we had reached consensus on this name. So I guess I'm not, is it back up on the agenda to not adopt that name? I guess I'm just wondering, is this about putting it back to council to adopt the name change that we reached consensus around? I'm just a little confused about what we're doing.
Well, for one, there were concerns raised by at least one member that the decision had been made, or two people raised this, Marcia and both Felicia, raised the fact that we made the decision without the full commission body here and present. But there has since been 3 months since we've made that decision, and I think now is the time for someone to speak up if they don't like the name change.
I didn't have a problem with the decision being made. I just felt as though we should let people know that that's what we're doing, but I feel like, and this might not be the PC thing to say, but I'm gonna say it, that people get wrapped around the name when we're not doing the work that we need to be doing. So I suggest I think Garrick had a good point. I thought about it later, that the ramifications of the reparations is important, but I think we should qualify. Usman and myself and Garrick have been talking in the subcommittee that we're about to propose, that we should clarify some terms. So I would say, let's just clarify the terms. If we agree to the name change, and with Marissa, let's roll forward. And let's not reopen this again unless there's pushback for some reason. And let's get on with the business of what we came here to do.
Because I was the other individual who wasn't present for that meeting, I don't have any problem with the name change. I understand sort of the complexity of the name and why it would change. And I guess I'm also interested in learning about this subcommittee because I feel like I'm a little lost with that Marcia just brought up.
Any other comments from the Zoom room, or Renika, or any other of our commissioners?
Okay.
I think that what this came down to, I'm sorry.
Yep. Green, yeah.
I think that what this came down to was the word reparations. Some people had the position or had the thought that
Just can't hear.
I'll speak up.
I'm sorry.
I can sit down there too. If everybody spoke up, it would be no problem.
Right, yeah, then that's the.
Happy to sit there.
This room is hard.
Okay, I'll try to speak up, and I'll try to speak relatively quickly because I have a very concise statement on this, which is some people felt inserting the word reparations really in lieu of racialized harms would make some people feel oppositional to our work because reparations has that feel of a cash payment. And some of us felt that reparations was exactly the word we should be using because reparations, in fact, is the nationwide movement. I don't have a solution to that. We use reparations, and some people are going to say, oh, no, I'm opposed to that, intuitively or instinctively. And some people will hear reparations say, yes, that's the nationwide movement we want to be part of. And that's where I came down, and I hope that's where the council will come down. And I think there's no right or wrong here. I think reparations is a more accurate statement of what we're doing, and we should just go with it. It was by consensus here, and I hope the council will approve it.
At the risk of provoking Marcia's irritation with me, I really think it would be helpful to council to have a motion and a vote that we know represents the majority. I know, Marcia, you don't want to do that, but the council really needs guidance if they're going to change the name. Alex was.
No, I didn't have a problem with us doing a vote about something. Let's just be clear when we're gonna vote and when we're gonna have consensus and what we're doing. So, I don't have a problem with the vote about that.
I just wanted to clarify that as a joint mayoral city council commission, that it is the mayor and the city council president who would just make the decision about the name change. That's my understanding. It does not have to go back to the council. Because the resolution itself doesn't actually specify a particular name. It just says, is that correct?
Yeah, I agree with that, and actually wrote it.
That a joint mayoral city council commission be established.
Okay.
So.
Well then, if I may, do you feel like you need a consensus is acceptable, or would you prefer that we have a vote?
So we're missing how many members? And this has been discussed previously, right?
Yes.
We're missing Usman and Jeremy and.
No, Jeremy's here now.
Oh, Jeremy's here now. You see him?
That's,
Oh,
yeah.
Jeremy, okay.
Actually, I think that's it.
So just Usman.
Okay.
And he's aware of the conversation. He wasn't there when we held debates, but he's been here at least one subsequent meeting when we talked about the name change. That it's a more palatable name, and that people can carry it on their CVs. We do understand that in the field of professionalism, which we're all a part of, we really respect this work. I think anyone who's here and watching what we're doing, we respect this work. It's hard work. It's necessary work. It aligns with our social justice values. But we also understand that people have post-commission lives, and that the title might, in some ways, also give other people outside of this community who respects this work different impressions about this person, particularly on the basis of their race. Those are all the points that I have to share on this.
You can say the name one more time for us.
The Northampton Reparations Study Commission. And the beauty about using study is that it really casts our work in the light of like legitimate research. We are legitimately researching this cause. We're researching what reparations means to us and what it means to other people, that's something that's legitimate, and no one can tell us not to do that, right? So we think that I can't imagine anyone coming up with viable qualms with this new name. Rachel Naismith, yeah.
Yeah, hi. I just want to suggest we've got so much on the agenda and we did discuss this, we came up with consensus, so I would suggest we move on.
Okay, great. Any more comments?
No, I have no problem with the name change.
Okay, so it sounds like we've all agreed by way of consensus to pass this change. All right, great. In our next agenda item, I'd like for us to, for the commissioners who are here to report out on any of the research and work that you've done. I think our mayor and city council president would appreciate having an update, given that we will be eventually turning in a report to them and to the members of the community. Rachel, would you like to begin?
Sure. So I found a very useful document that was the Community Health Needs Assessment, and Cooley Dickinson, I think, was the main author and initiator. It has a lot of data in it about health and also a little bit about housing. And I think we can use it. Some of the data is not down to the town level. It's at the county or state level. And so I'm not sure if we can use some of that or not. But there is also data with regard to race, broken down by race, broken down by town. So that's one of the things that I was working on, and I shared it, I believe, with all the commissioners. The second thing is I contacted Historic Northampton and asked them if they had a list of programs or events related to African Americans in Northampton. And they worked really hard on this and sent a fantastic list that I shared with our co-chairs.
That's excellent. Thank you so much, Rachel. You're welcome to say more if you like, or if not, Bill, I'd like for you to review some of your work.
Sure. Because housing is such an important consideration, and because housing has been a focus of reparations commissions and committees in other municipalities, we've thought that looking at housing, and in particular because the city council had in its resolution a reference to restrictive racial covenants in a piece of property in Northampton, that we wanted to look at how prevalent that was, and first started with the question of, can we find out? And so in that regard, I'd like to thank the Register of Deeds, Mary Oberding, who has in fact begun an inquiry for us. And I spoke to her as recently as today, and I gave a report last time on the two different ways in which deeds are kept in Massachusetts. The Register did inform me that she had looked at the part of the deeds world in Massachusetts, which really runs through the land court, which is registered land. It's not how most of us think of our deeds being recorded if you buy a house and you go to the Register of Deeds. So the idea of looking at the registered land is actually did not come up with anything in terms of a racial covenant. On the other hand, that way of recording land is not that common in this part of the state. It's only been in effect since 1901, so it was actually a fairly limited look at land in Northampton, but it did not disclose any of this. To go back to the properties that have gone through generations of sales in Northampton is a pretty significant task, to say the least. But racial covenants were in land were outlawed by the Supreme Court in 1947, and so the question is, can you look at land, because conveyancers like to keep the descriptions exactly as they were. And the way that conveyancers, land use attorneys, dealt with this issue of restrictive covenants across the country and in Massachusetts is they put something at the top of the deed that said, anything in this deed that deals with restrictive covenants is illegal. But they leave the description exactly the same because conveyancers want to convey exactly the same land out that the deed had coming in. Anyway, that's what we're looking at to see if we can get more information on how many pieces and where they are and how prevalent were restrictive covenants in Northampton. My last conversation with Register Oberding, I suggested to her that one way to look at this is through the names that are mentioned in the book, Slavery in the Connecticut River Valley. And that book has in it an interesting piece on Northampton that says there's a 1,300-page history of Northampton, and slavery got 3 sentences. But the 3 or 4 sentences have names. And so I suggested to Mary, I sent her a copy of those pages of the book and said, could you look at these names? See if those persons who owned slaves and were residents of Northampton have had property, and if they had property, did they have restrictive covenants in it? It's a bit of a shot in the dark, but I thought it was a wise place to look. So that's the update from that inquiry.
Felicia,
Good evening. As many of you know who are here, and can everyone hear me? Perfect. Last meeting, I discussed the opportunity for professional development designed specifically for white people in leadership and management roles to participate in an anti-racist development group for white leaders. It offers a chance to be proactive and challenge systematic and individual racism, while also building greater skills and more inclusive culture that supports members of our committees, our communities, and our commission. This group starts in April. It's an 8-week small group cohort program specifically for white leaders. It's a place for learning and reflection, peer support and action based in frameworks of intersectional social justice and challenging white supremacy culture. It is perfect for something like this. It addresses how we do our leadership work and confronting common patterns rooted in oppressive systems. And we can strategically move organizational culture and practice towards aligning in anti-racist values. If you're interested in doing this, it is on a sliding scale based on either organizational or individual budget. And if you're interested, I can send information to you. I know the commission has already received that, but if you are interested, if you give me your email, I will send you some more details. Thank you.
Regarding Garrick and I have been talking about what we can contribute as counselors and sort of from within the government, and we are going to be we are thinking through and doing a deep dive into that which is within the power of the city to do, and to be able to bring back to the commission some very specific ideas of what, and again, and this I hope flowed through the resolution, but a real emphasis on directing the commission's attention to what the city can do and is within our power to do. And so we hope to bring back to the commission at the next meeting as comprehensive a list of ideas and points at which the city can act. We've talked about some of the legal considerations, equal protection, and, recent Supreme Court jurisdiction that might limit us and that we want to be mindful of, but then we also want to look at specific things. And so those include, like, thinking about upcoming projects that can incorporate acknowledgments of slavery in the city's history. We're also particularly interested in, because one of the things that I think commission members, as they've gone out to explore the things that we're talking about, is a lack of data, just what Bill just talked about, and some other, we've focused on. So one of the things that I think that we hope to do is identify points at which the city interacts with the public, and in the course of its business, where the city could be, we could be asking those departments and those city departments and so forth to begin to collect some demographic information that could be useful going forward. We're finding that it's difficult to look back in time to get accurate data because it wasn't collected, but I think that we can make a real point. One of the things that we can do is to begin to gather that data and going forward. So those are just a couple of examples, but that's what Garrick and I are hoping we can bring back to the conversation in more specific terms, and hope to use our understanding of city government to do.
Bill?
Yeah, I have a request for you and Garrick, who's ever is on this subcommittee, and that is, to the extent it can be done at this point, I would appreciate some leadership from you all and some direction in terms of what is legally possible. And I am concerned about some recent lawsuits that have been filed that targets private action based on discrimination, based on affirmative action that is couched as discrimination. So, I mean, this is a fraught area legally, and I would like to know more about what our city solicitor or what our council thinks is possible. And I would love to be able to know how Amherst solved the issue, to the extent it solved it, how their commission solved this question of what about race-based programming? What is possible? And to the extent that you can, or your report back can distinguish between those things that are legally difficult, at least broadly speaking, and those which are easier, I would find that very helpful. So, for example, Amherst has in its Reparations Commission report a suggestion with regard to changing the names of streets. And I think the city has well within its power the right to change the names of streets. I assume that state roads have numbers and things that can't be changed so easily. But the names of the streets, I think, is within the purview of the council. And I would like to know why we don't have a Sojourner Truth Boulevard, right, for example. And I think that replacing names of streets that are named after persons who were enslavers with persons who fought for freedom would be a great idea. I mean, I'd like to see that happen. I know it's way more complicated than what I just said, but the outline is pretty straightforward. That seems to me to be for example, this is in the area where you don't have a problem, or we don't have a problem legally. So, that's my request.
Can I ask, Bill, are you, and I'm not sure that this is the purview of this commission to get beyond making the recommendation, but not that your suggestion's not in the purview. I'm thinking about the money. I'm thinking about whether or not this commission has an interest in also understanding the kind of expense to the city for a project like that. But I think I'm answering my own question out loud, which is, I guess what I'm asking, or I guess what I'm wondering is that I don't think the commission necessarily ought to concern itself with how much money a recommendation might cost, but I do think we ought to be mindful if we're making a recommendation or a suggestion that could be very costly to the city. And I guess I just wonder what commissioners feel about that in terms of part of what we might be thinking about.
So I'd love to answer that question, but Marcia has her hand up, so me, then Jim. You're muted, Marcia.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was going to speak to the next report in, but one of the things that I've asked, and Garrick and I talked about it, was to pull together a committee with Bill and Marissa to see about what are all the things we can look at legally. And Usman had suggested that there's certain things that within our purview we could do that are specifically about time periods, and then there's some issues around what Bill just brought up. So I had sent out an email to Bill and to Marissa about meeting on several legal issues, in addition to getting a one-pager about the legal issues of meeting, so we know next time whether or not we can meet, but also to start to do almost like a Venn diagram of the various legal issues we need to deal with, and be specific about where they should get shipped out to for information and then brought back. So, or we could actually do, yeah, so that was one thing that I was thinking about, and I was waiting to hear from those folks, and so that Garrick and I could set up an appointment with them. So, but I'll talk more about that with the subcommittee.
Great, Jim, or Bill, sorry.
I just want to make one comment on the money, which is way ahead of where we are. But I also think that before we write our report or our draft report, that we do need to think about it, because I think it was not helpful for the state of California to write a Reparations Commission recommendation with a number that was so astronomical that no one takes it seriously. So I do think the answer to the question is yes. I don't think we have to make the recommendations from this. We have to point out to the city council. I think it is our job to say a preliminary look at this is this will be very expensive, or a preliminary look at this is manageable with volunteers for the most part, and some advice from the city solicitor. So I do think that drawing some distinctions between the various things that we've looked at and were recommended, I think we should put in something, a realistic statement about money as we see it. Not realistic whether the city can do it, but realistic in terms of what the expenses will be.
Right. So I think this is a fabulous conversation to have. From my sense, there are 3 lists, right? There's a list of recommendations we can make that would apply to all people, and that's a legitimate means of doing our work, because it falls within the parameters of the law, which requires equal protection of everyone's rights. So you can't give one racial group or ethnic group some special treatment using public funds. And then we have a dream list. That's if special legislation is passed at the state level, what will we ask the city city or anyone in this community to take on as a project? And then the third list of recommendations that we could create would be those that fall within the charitable donations apparatus. For example, CBI has a reparations project. That's a charitable donations project. That means we can make recommendations to anybody in this city about how they could spend their own money willingly to do things to support Black people based on the history and the evidence that we provide. So those are the 3 lists that we can come up with, and that is consistent with the Amherst group, who had a whole list about what people in the community can do apart from the municipality. I'd like to give a report, but I want to also just kind of answer some of the questions that have come up. about evaluation, for example. So my work has been really centered on how do we trace Black communities from 1654, when we were first chartered, all the way up until the present day, and how do we track that immediate community that existed in the 19th and the 20th century, early 20th century. And one of the problems that I've come up against is the fact that there are no sales receipts but one for any of the slaves, right? And that's what is prominently considered to be a sort of document of valuation. Like, how do I know how much this individual costs or was worth according to the market? Well, I've mentioned this before. Part of our harms report is going to talk about the crime of slavery being related to the destruction or the destruction of or the negligence of documentation. So slave traders, they weren't going to keep an abundance of evidence about all the wrongs that they did. And so we're asking a lot of ourselves to go back and find evidence of financial costs, because some of that information doesn't exist. So I've consulted a historian. She said it wouldn't be fair to try to produce a value based on other methods that I suggested, but I still will be doing a review of the other methods. So for example, we can do a survey of costs of slaves that were sold in New Hampshire and Rhode Island, because that data does exist, like average cost of slaves. It's in a scholarly database. I have access to it. I can produce a chart that says, well, this many slaves, if it was just next door in Northampton or in Rhode Island or in New Hampshire, would have cost this amount of money. Then, as Bill talked about, I've asked Northampton to look for the land of slave owners, so we can look at how much their property was worth altogether, apart from their slaves, and we can list that without using any personally identifiable information. And we can also use a couple of other metrics to come up with a total, and that total is less about asking the municipality to give us that money according to like inflation rates of today, like give us that money back, and that it's less about that, and it's more about providing a diligent history of the Black community as a part of our work, right? I feel like that is reparations. That's what Ta-Nehisi Coates argued in the case for reparations. He was saying, like, you know, like allowing people to do the work, just investigating it and creating a documentary history is reparations in part because of the crimes of slavery. They don't want you to know what they did. So it is a part of reparations for the city to allow us to do this work, I think. I've also been studying the Black community from that arc. I could say a whole lot of stuff, but I'll try to just be very brief. One thing we have to acknowledge is that Northampton was established as a plantation city. That was the whole point. They wanted to run plantations. They were very much so aware that there were slaves being used to do this work, and that's why they recruited and used slaves. So we have to be attentive to the fact that this place was created with the abuses of forced labor in mind. There were also corresponding abuses of native populations where they were tricked and swindled out of their land. That's reality, and so we can talk about that history in our report. If we look at the early history of Black of Northampton, we don't find a Black school, a colored school. If you look at municipal city directories throughout the 19th century, Black people were never in municipal leadership positions. They were never a part of the professional class. There was not a sufficient printing industry in Northampton such that Black people could publish and print with equal access to business and entrepreneurial opportunities, as was the case with white people. And there were only about 2 major newspapers here at any one time anyway. So there was restrictions on how people could articulate their position in life. There were very, very few, if any, Black business owners apart from one man, Moquette, who ran a catering and food shop in Northampton during the 19th century. And apart from that, I haven't been able to find Black business owners. Most of all of the Black residents throughout the 19th century and early 20th century were part of the manual laboring class and domestic classes There were a significant amount of people who lived in hotels and inns as workers, as domestic servants, and we aren't sure if they were ever paid for their work because room and board could have very much so been proposed as their pay. There were also quite a few black people who regularly lived with their employers. Again, we can't even ascertain how much pay that they received because room and board was probably considered a form of pay. So we already have a sense, without any numbers, that black people had an extremely restricted points of access to any professional, print-based, educational-based access to upward mobility. So we weren't going to find successful black people here because there wasn't a process for them to be successful. Another thing that we can talk about in terms of injury is that at the point at which a Massachusetts bureaucrat was coming up with the whole concept of the Freedmen's Bureau, Northampton never tried to have any sort of Reconstruction policies for themselves here in this city. So there was no way people in Massachusetts didn't know about Reconstruction in the South. And there's no way they didn't know that they also had a history of slave owning here. And they made no attempts to have a Reconstruction policy here in Northampton. That's a harm. That's a harm. Again, because we have Massachusetts leaders in power. There's also weird inconsistencies about the numbering of slaves. And there's at least one census that places 4 slaves in Northampton in the 1840s. Which we should all be aghast about because slavery was outlawed in 1783 by way of a court ruling. So because there are some incidences where there were still slaves noted in the state census, in the federal census after 1780s, we should be suspicious of any sort of declaration that there were never slaves up until the Civil War also here, or that domestic servants weren't embodying many of the habits of slavery. We also have access to execution records dating back to the 17th century, so the 1600s. And we have records that will be in our report of when black people were brutally punished by way of a whipping post or executed for crimes. What else do I want to mention? We had a significantly small black population throughout the 19th century, as small as 14 noted in the census in 1840, and as many as about 200 to 300 towards the end of the 19th century. So black population really started to grow starting in the 20th century. I will have a series of maps that will allow us to study the movement of black populations. So I've been going through all the census records, and I've looked at literally, I'm not even joking, I've looked at every name of every black person who's lived here, starting at least with 1840. I've put my eyes on it. I know what they did for a living. I know I cannot quantify how many were voters starting around 1850. There were a few black men who were voters here. And most of which I think we'll see is black people had restrictions on access points to opportunity, and that's really the big claim that we can make. And we could talk about uncertainties about wage equality based on their living environments, and we could talk about economic stagnancy based on the fact that they were mostly part of, and I do mean like by mostly, like nearly all were manual laborers and domestic servants. So that's going to be my contribution, very much so a historical framework for understanding our black population.
I don't want to add to your work, but I'm actually interested in something that comes out of the City Council resolution, and that is the statement that descendants of slaves are not nearly as large a part of this population as they would have been but for the Fugitive Slave Act, which caused people of color to flee from Northampton. And I don't know if there's data that is available about that, but it is a striking part of the information that's in the City Council resolution. And if there's some way to quantify that, or at least amplify our understanding of that, I would appreciate that.
I happen to be teaching a class right now on the slave narrative tradition, and so I'm looking with my students at all sorts of really cool cultural materials. And one fact of the matter of slavery is that Black people's last names were not preserved. In fact, a lot of Black people who were slaves were not even given last names at all, so they went their whole lives without a last name. That means that one of the crimes of slavery was to ensure that there could not be a genealogy of Black people. So again, a lot of what I've been saying to the group all this time is that the crimes of slavery was purposely prevents us from doing the work we need to do. That was the point. And our goal as reparation researchers is to figure out nuanced ways to get around that. And maybe it's impossible. That might be something that we come out with, but is it fair to ask that of ourselves? If we know that slaves weren't given last names and we're like, how many exactly came from slavery? We can try. I'm going to try. Yes, I can do that. But, I mean, they didn't have last names. So.
I'm sorry, could I just, because I know this, David Ruggles Center and Steve Strymer have done this work. They know the people that left. They know the houses. Basil, Dorsey.
Yep.
There's
their whole family.
There are records of that, what Bill's asking. And I don't think it's impossible. And they had last names by that point, and they had home ownership, and they fled because the white people here did not support them.
Yes, I have some of that data too, and I will get in touch with Steve Strymer. I've been told multiple times to contact him, and so I will invite him to come speak to our group. Thank you so much. Marsha Morris.
Sorry. I was going to do the subcommittee that we're working up the work for, but I wanted to see if Jeremy was ready to talk about the work that I've been supporting him on for the high school.
Yep. All right, so our subcommittee was specifically looking at racialized harms in the school district at Northampton. I had recently, me and Marsha both had a meeting with the heads of BSU, the Black Student Union, the Student of Color Alliance, and the Vice Principal, Ms. Harrison. The head, so we had a meeting with the head of BSU. His name is Mr. Lucy, he's a teacher at the school, and the head of SOCA is Mr. Isler. During the meeting, especially, we wanted to inquire information about racial aspects. For example, what's the attendance rate, any disciplinary actions, or grades based upon race, which we were able to find. There isn't, the school, especially when it comes to that, it's not specifically, a lot of the data is from when parents entered it, like for their students when they enrolled in school, so like in kindergarten. So we want more, one of our ideas is to get more specific information and bring it back to, and then bring it back to the committee. Another plan of ours as well is April, well, I now know that April 2nd, I was planning to have the BSU and SOCA members come to this committee and speak on behalf of their experiences. But Marsha informed me that he actually have a meeting that's planned for May. I just want to confirm with the chair if that is correct.
Oh, so you'd like to invite the students to come during our May meeting? I think that's fabulous. That's a great idea. Yeah, that's perfect.
I just was making sure that that was scheduled for May and not. So one thing especially I've been doing is seeing who can actually come, because of course 5 to 7 is a very weird time, especially the students that have after-school programs that they need to do. I did send to you, Sarah, the information that we have collected so far about school and breakdown by race, and Marcia especially took a bunch of notes in our last conference meeting, so she can add on to more specific questions. Thank you.
Wonderful.
So it's been a privilege to work with Jeremy, just supporting him on, what were the things that he needed to line up this meeting with the school, which Jeremy was the one that sent out the email to the representatives, the advisor for the student groups, and also the vice principal and so on. And so the meeting with the vice principal, they let us know that we're certainly welcome to go back to the school and run any kind of communication or data collection that we want to during the time that the Black Student Union meets. Now, the Black Student Union is a brand new entity. It was originally a part of the SOCA group, which was the Children of Color. But they hence broke off and started meeting this year. And so the thing is that we'll talk about with the school, and I was able to get a commitment from the school that we could go back, was to have a prep meeting with the students to ask them whatever questions we want to ask or put forward to them, so that they have some time to organize themselves and think about what it is that they want to say. So Usman recommended that, we do some prep work also around definitions and understanding, so that the young people understood specifically what we were talking about in terms of racial harm. And so I'll be working, I asked Usman if he could work up a definition for racial harm that we could also share with the committee, because we all might have different ideas of what racial harm means anyway. Even adults might need that. And so Usman is working that up, and we will then share that with the young people so they have a point of reference. Okay, this is what we mean by racial harm. What racial harms do you feel like you felt as a student, and also as a person of color in this, as an African American student or a Black person? And what are some of the things in terms of reparations that you feel would be important for the mayor and the city council and so on to know about? And so, with some definition around that as well. So, but it's really been Jeremy's work. I've just been his sidekick, so to speak, sending out very good emails and all of that communication stuff. Yeah, and the schools, it seems to be very cooperative. There is a tricky point around the data, however. Young people's parents are allowed to check as many boxes as they like around racial data. So you could be many different things. And so, and you're not counted once, you're counted every time. So that is something we'll have to control for, talk about how to look at that data. And the more important point, I think, might be just to have an understanding of how young people see this issue through their eyes and not through necessarily my reading glasses and other people's bifocals and so on. So that's one thing. However, with the discussion of the schools, there is another public high school, and that's Smith Folk. And so because we don't have any representation from them on the council, I did go ahead and reach out to the superintendent. Laura Kurtzler was the one that gave me his name. I left a voicemail with talked with his administrative assistant, and he is supposed to get back to me. I do know the vice principal got back to me and said we could send them any information, but I want to communicate with the superintendent that we want to have direct communication and contact with these young people and find out. Well, we did find out there is no Black Student Union or Children of Color program specifically over there. Just a note, there's only 2 people of color on the Northampton, 2 teachers. There's no people of color in administration, just as note for that. And I'll find out what the deal is with the other public school. And Jeremy brought up, which I thought was interesting, that the teacher for Black History is a white teacher. So obviously the kids, you know, they're aware that they're having a class about history with a white teacher. So what that means, we should probably ask them what that means to them. I'm not sure. But so really, Jeremy's been doing a really great job on introducing me to people, and I thank him for that, and helping shape out the conversations that we're having at the subcommittee that Usman and Derek and I are working on. Has been informed a lot of by some of the questions we're asking about what do the young people need to know to be able to engage in this conversation, and for us all to be talking about apples to apples, orange to oranges. So that's what I was.
And I'd like to speak, and then Felicia. Some things came to mind for me when Marissa was asking questions about, like, what would we potentially ask for if we were to ask for a money-based project? And I thought that, you know, allowing Black people to have access to ancestral DNA testing would be a really good funded project, as an example of a wish list sort of project, so that we can ascertain who came from slavery. The issue is, like, thankfully none of us are restricted by way of mobility. So would it be fair to say, like, the only way that money could be spent on Black people is to prove that either those Black people still exist here in this community after all those years, or that the white people who enslaved them still exist here? And I think we're asking another impossible question of ourselves in terms of compliance. And some people who are against reparations will bring that up, right? Well, are the slavers and their families still here, or are the descendants of enslaved people still here? And if they aren't, can you make that case? Well, then that's a case you can't make anywhere in America, because we all can get up and leave whenever we want to, right? So I've been thinking of the debate section of what could potentially go into our report too, which is just spelling out some of the debates around reparations and the sort of gymnastics we have to do with some logic in order to deal with the counterclaims, but also potentially with what we would like to do. Another idea I had was to commission, I'm sorry.
I didn't even talk about the subcommittee that I was working on.
Marsha, I'm speaking.
Okay.
The second idea was for us to have a life skills workbook that would be written to appeal to a high school student. And this could, of course, go to any student, but what life skills does a young person need to have, right? You need, simple things like setting up a bank account, like getting a license, like complying with certain things when you move from state to state. Like, what are some life skill points, and could that be a booklet that we ask a school to create or a nonprofit to create? Things like that it will cost money, I guess, in some ways, but there's not an immediate expense for that request to a nonprofit or to a local community group. Say, hey, can you create a life skills workbook? So those are things that came to mind for me. I'm sorry, Marsha, but I didn't mean to be rude to you. If you would like to speak, please do.
I just wanted to say, please look out for an email from Jeremy and myself about what are the questions that you all have about what are young people thinking about the issue of reparations, both in Northampton and also around America, because these young people are growing up with the question of reparations. We didn't grow up with the question of reparations. This wasn't on in people's minds or agenda in the way it is now. So I just would like folks to be thinking about that.
I'm sorry, Felicia was next, I'm sorry.
There's a few things. First, I'm going to move backwards. And in terms of the DNA that you spoke of and sort of a project, I have access. I worked with Anita Foman, Dr. Foman, who is a PhD professor of communication studies at Westchester University. And she founded and is a primary investigator on the DNA discussion project, which explores the social construct of race. And as we think about, and I'm just listening to Marcia talk about sort of the complexity of race and identity and the young people. This is some of the work that I do as well and have access to folks, as many of you also do, but that might be somebody that we may want to consider working with. And she has actually, when I was working for Springfield College, she came in and she took DNA samples of many students, and then we ended up having a conversation to help them find out who they are. And there's a lot of controversy around that. And so just to add on to that with Dr. Patterson, I would be happy to reach out to Dr. Foman in regards to that.
Yeah, invite her to a meeting, I would, if you don't mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
And the other thing that I wanted to share with Commissioner Marcia, I heard you talking about sort of terminology and the importance of getting on the same page and having a shared understanding. Some of you know that I ended up writing a chapter on Black identity, plantation politics, and leadership, and in that defined a number of terms that I think would be appropriate and words that we use so that we do have a shared understanding and able to communicate amongst one another and use sort of a shared definition. And I'd be happy to work on that with you and Jeremy or whomever. I know you mentioned Usman as well, but think that that could be something that I could contribute in a way that I have access to already.
That's fabulous.
I'm just wondering if, because I don't want to cut any discussion short, but I know on the agenda is a discussion about subcommittees, and Marcia's mentioned it a few times. Okay. I just want to reiterate something that Attorney Seawald told us early on. If we form subcommittees and then we can't meet without posting within those subcommittees. I think it's in some ways working pretty well for us to be maybe teaming up on issues that strike our interest in pairs or whatever. But once we start getting to groups once we start getting into groups about something that's going to like come back to our agenda that's bigger than the quorum of this whole body, that gets to be a little tricky. And if we call anything a subcommittee, then that smaller group can't meet privately without posting for like, say 5 of us get together and we call ourselves a subcommittee, or you designate us a subcommittee, that we then run into problems that more than, I think, 3 of that group of 5 becomes an open meeting violation. So I just really, so this is not said to discourage the work or anything. I mean, we had a lot of people doing things and reports back, and I think is great, and I just don't want us to run into any problems. So before we talk about subcommittees, we got to put that on the table. And I'm sorry, just one last thing. The suggestion of sending around emails to the whole commission about our work, it is outside of our meetings. That is an open meeting violation. Like we really can't CC all, we just can't do it. We cannot CC all. So I just wanted to reiterate that, which Attorney Seawald explained at the beginning of our work. I'm sorry, I feel like I'm always the asshole who's saying these things. But
it's okay, you gotta hold the line.
Can I just say what the scaffolding, like, we're trying to build the group that is meeting is going to propose a subcommittee for the very reasons, Marissa, that you just said. The very thing, the reason why I wanted to get together with you and Bill and the attorney is that we get a one-pager for the group so we know what we can do and what we can't do, what's in the window and what's out of the window, so we don't make mistakes. And so what Derek, myself, and Usman have done is that we're going to propose the subcommittee, and we want to get that information first so we can do the subcommittee in the right, with the right structure. And what we're, in the meantime, what we're doing is putting together, we're designing what we believe should be a community process. How do we engage the community in a conversation that we can both gather data from them, but give them enough of an understanding of what we're talking about, thus the definitions, thus the reason why we want to know what we can talk about when we're in those committees. Can you have, open discussion and people talk about various things when you say to them, do you want to talk about your racial harms? Is the city liable for anything? Like, we need to know those things so that we don't make a mistake. But to date, all we're getting is verbalized stuff. And you go to a meeting and you listen to all this stuff, you don't remember what Attorney Sewall said. So you've got it, like a one-pager that boils it down would be really helpful. So anyway, what I wanted to let you know is that Derek and myself and Usman have been meeting weekly since we met, so that we begin to build a conversation on what it's going to take to design a community process. Not like jump into a meeting and then say we got it. No. We're bringing to the conversations, okay, yeah, I thought about this, this needs to be looked at that. That's how the conversation about legality came up. That's how the conversation, we need a definition before we even try to approach the committee to find anything out. The kids need a definition, well, we need a definition. So what I would say is send us the definitions. All of that will be proposed in a charter for that subcommittee. We will lay it out. And that's what I would suggest for all the subcommittees. Put it in writing so we can all see what is going on. So I would say, Marissa, that's the reason why I want to meet with you. I'm calling you, we're trading phone calls, is to get into that committee so we can meet with this guy and say, okay, you need to give us the ins and outs, what's in, what's out, what can we do, what we can't do. Anyway, with the committee, the subcommittee that we're proposing, right now we're thinking about designing a process where we will be able to give the community working definitions, and then we can have a conversation about specific things. What are the racial harms that you feel like we've dealt with in Northampton? What are the ways in which you think of reparations? And that's the work that we're engaged in, that conversation. Out of that fell out, well, you know what? Why don't we use this arts, it's called the third annual Power of Arts, Truth and Arts Educational Festival, to begin a conversation around what do adults believe is a common definition of racial harms? What is a common definition of reparations? So we'll have that. So that's one thing that's going to be our first foray, which Usman is setting up the panel for, myself and Derek, and I think somebody else is on that. And I was going to ask if we could have the lady who's our administrator come to that meeting so she could take notes, but I guess we don't have an administrator. And then the other part was the work that we're doing with Jeremy. Let's see what this looks like when we try to scaffold up, hey, this is the definitions, so on. So that's how that's going to be moving. So if that makes sense, we're trying to get some structures in here.
Great. Just real quick point of information. The minutes that I wrote up for our first meeting, which have been approved, has a short overview of all the stuff that Sewall said about our open meeting policy. And then also there's the document that he gave us. Lastly, I did already draft and circulate a letter for Seawald to give us his opinion on the nature of reparations and the asks that we are going to be submitting to the public. So I will be submitting that to him. I also have been in contact with the Donahue Institute, and it turns out they do work on other municipalities surrounding Amherst, because the Donahue Institute is part of UMass, and they produced a demographic report for the Amherst group, and I asked if they could do the same for us. And I will be asking them to give us data on minority business ownership, unemployment, poverty, sort of systemic points of information. So that will come from them. But I wanted to suggest 2 other potential reparations type things that we could possibly do. I hear so much about childcare being an issue here in Northampton, and we have this wonderful professional community that can make way with the issue of there being a lack of it. But I even hear from my colleagues who live here that there aren't sufficient childcare services, and these are colleagues of color. And so I think that in some way we would probably make a recommendation. We don't know how to solve all of these issues, obviously, but we think childcare is usually an issue that does impact people of color. And if we want people to come here and grow families, they have to have that kind of service. And then also, this is really a shot in the dark, but there's a rule right now that every school has to have a certain quota of black students, I believe is a state law and rule. And I wonder if there could be a home rule exception so that black parents could choose where they send their students. So that's why I say it's a shot in the dark. But like, could they choose where they send their students? Like, could that be their special privilege? Like,
You mean within the district?
yeah, I know that there aren't a ton of schools, but so if you're a black parent and your student is assigned to Northampton High School, could you then say, no, I want my student to go to Smith Vocational? Like, could they have the option because they're black?
Those are two, sorry, I mean,
Go ahead.
I mean, those are two different schools. I mean, and like school districts, actually. I know it's sort of weird. Smith Voc is just one school, but it's its own school district.
Okay.
So parents already have that choice.
So they can send their student anywhere they want anyway?
To either one, yeah.
Okay.
You have to apply to Smith Vocational, but they hold aside a certain number of positions for Northampton students.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
I also think one other thing to keep in mind about Smith Voc is that it's a regional school district. It's not a Northampton-centric school.
Bill, your mic's off, Bill.
Sorry. One thing to bear in mind about Smith Voc is that it's a regional school district. It's not a Northampton-centric school district. It's not like there's 2 high schools for Northampton. There are 2 high schools located within Northampton, but one of them is the Northampton High School, and one is Smith Voc, which really draws its students from the entire region.
About 20% of Smith Voc are Northampton students.
Right, but our charter says for people who live and work and learn in Northampton. That's the charter. We're following, as a matter of fact, that's what we're doing every time we're working in this subcommittee. Every time we talk about something, go back to the charter. Our charter has that laid out very clearly.
Yes, and Marcia, the mayor just confirmed that there's at least 10%, 20%, I apologize, that do serve, that are serving within this context of this community.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, Rachel, and then Renika, and then Jeremy, and then Bill.
Okay, I have 3 quick points, and I'll make it quick. The first one is, I did send email to the entire commission, which I guess I shouldn't have done, but when we have information, like a report, such as I found at Cooley Dickinson, or data, how do we share it with each other that so that we're not breaking the rules? Because we all have these overlapping interests, and I just wonder, would it be a Google document or in what way? And that might be a question for the attorney. That's my first point. Second point, from what Marissa said, it sounds like if there are 3 or fewer people, they can meet without agendas and minutes. But if any of these subcommittees, which I think is really the way to go, subcommittees, if they are over 3 people, then it sounds as if we have to publish minutes. So maybe, and then my final one is, are we really doing what we need to be doing with regard to communicating with the public? We've heard many comments and complaints, and I don't know if that falls within the purview of what Marcia has been talking about.
Exactly.
Well, I circulated questions for a survey, like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to have that kind of attitude. I circulated survey questions like back in November, and I've asked so many times for responses and recommendations. So we have done this work. Rachel, you did circulate survey questions. I've been in contact with Donahue Institute. I've been reporting about this. They are the entity that I suggested should do the work of facilitating our survey, which means we have to give them the questions that they will do the survey for us, and I come up with all the parameters, like, let's do it for a 1-month period, since we have to turn around quickly to produce our initial report. So I've been working on this because I thought it would be too much to talk to everybody about, but like I was going to ask, could they facilitate a 1-month survey that asks questions about what we could do to encourage cultural consciousness and a welcoming community, and another sort of bland question that does not ask for a racial harms report. And then after we do our first survey, ask them to facilitate a second survey where we have spent more time thinking about that question about racial harm, so we don't invite information that we can't use, right? We have to be concerned about defamation, about our liability with inviting and then publishing information that we haven't verified. So I just don't want us to say that we haven't done any of that work. That's not really a fair representation of the stuff that some of us have in fact been doing.
Well, and thank you. Those were great questions and points, Rachel. I think the question might be is whether, and maybe we need to take a step back and think about our organization and our timeline, and make sure that we are accessing the city resources that are easy for us to access, and utilizing those things to the fullest of the ability. So we have a web page within the city site. It can be a basis for where we can post more information. Because the point is not to shut down communication between all of us. And one of the things, for instance, I've thought that maybe we can do is to use our city's, the commission's website to post, maybe not necessarily as we do the work, because we're generating work product, but to our work, but once we do get a report issued, and certainly recommendations, I've always thought like maybe our website could, our space on the city government website could be used to post resources and things like that. So I think it'd be good for us to think about it, about making sure that we are accessing what the city can help us with, and things like distributing the survey and things like that. That's a matter of developing what we want and then getting some help. So this group here, we're not going to get a lot of reach with just us distributing something, but the city has the ability to help us with some things at low cost. I mean, and we do surveys. We sent one out. The Northampton Public Schools is in the midst of a strategic planning process and sent out surveys and got some, feedback and things like that. So that's one thing is, I think Garrick and I, that's when I said things that we could think about doing and helping with, we can do a better job of helping you guys know what the city can help with and facilitating that. And just to not to get into an exegesis about open meeting law, but Marcia, I'm happy to, and Rachel, I'm happy to go back to Alan Seawald and get something, and talk with him about what will work specifically in the context of this commission, to make sure that we're doing that. So I don't want to be off the cuff with my interpretation of open meeting laws, but I do think that until we get a structure, to use Marcia's word, scaffolding, which I love, that's a word I love in this context, some scaffolding in place about this, that we ought to be just mindful that if we are meeting in any group of more than, I believe, 5 for the number of members that we have, we're going to be running into trouble. And we don't have any formal appointed subcommittees. So yet, if we have them, there's going to be rules to apply. So I will help with that. I will talk to Alan Seawald, and I will bring back more information about that.
If we have a survey with just a few questions, do we have to get them approved by you too, or will we be able to autonomously move forward with the institute?
Would you agree? I mean,
Yeah.
this is your
charge.
committee, and
Jeremy, you've had your hand up.
Just to add to our subcommittee, one thing especially for our subcommittee would be good is that March proposed was seeing if to get information from people in the area who are graduates of the high school to get their information, because it'd be good to also not only have current people at the school, but also senior graduates who have passed. And just school changes every 4, 6, 5 years. I go to school. It's a lot different than what it looks like today. So it'd also be good to get their info as well. Just add another source. Thank you.
Thanks. I'd like for us to move on to our next agenda item. We've already kind of discussed it. So do you think we've had sufficient conversation about the process for forming subcommittees, or should we still say more about it?
I just had one thing to say real quick, and that is keeping in mind that, like, it's been brought up several times that we're kind of moving slowly, and we want to make sure that, like, we are addressing our charge. I think that I would be perfectly fine if we kept the subcommittees to fewer than 5 people. So we, at least until we have, so that we can just meet weekly and we don't have to worry about that administrative piece, so that we can get our business done, so like we don't have to worry about taking notes and then getting the notes approved and that type of thing. But that's just my personal feelings, and I want to make sure that we are not running afoul of open meeting, but we need to be able to do our work, and we also need a place for, like, working docs. And I don't know where that place is. I don't think it should be our page on the city website. I don't know if there's a SharePoint or something like that we have access to, where we can, like, put in the information that we are bringing in, especially since we cannot if we can't email everybody, we need a central data repository for the information that everyone is gathering, or else it's gonna just be in pieces. And that's all.
So one thing is, I'm sorry, I can't see the people in the room.
I do believe that the mayor wanted to answer Felicia's, her question. If you don't mind, Marcia.
So it sounds like you're going to get some more information from Solicitor Seawald, but I can just quickly share. So it's any subcommittee that you create must follow open meeting law. It doesn't matter the size of the subcommittee. You can have a subcommittee with 2 people. I don't recommend it, because then those 2 people cannot talk to each other except in an open meeting. So any subcommittee that you create will have to they will have to have publicly posted meetings 48 hours in advance. We'll have to meet in public. That is, any subcommittee is then a subset of this public body and has to follow open meeting law. I'm sorry, it is a real challenge of this work that we all do.
I also just want to put a little levity. We are collecting our information. I'm the central data point. I don't want to be like the kind of like I do all things, but I'm keeping up with all the documents. Our process now is if you have data that you want to go in the report, you share it with me because I'm putting together the draft. I've been collecting the information all along. I've been writing up the narratives of our debates, and this thing exists. It doesn't not exist, and it is a little bit bothersome that keeps getting repeated by everybody every month, that we're not doing anything, we have nothing to show for ourselves, we haven't done this, we haven't done that, because I feel like that's not a fair representation of what we have actually been doing.
It's not that I'm saying that we're not doing anything. I'm saying that we don't all have access to it easily. That is what I'm saying. If we all have to send it to you, then like, that makes you the keeper of all things. And so like, I would like, personally, when doing research, especially like a collaborative document like this, we should be able to all put it in one place and everybody can access it at will whenever they need to, and they shouldn't have to go through someone. That's what I'm saying.
But we can't do that because of it's a commission, so we can't. That's what we're saying. That's why I keep saying I'm not trying to be the all-knowing person. It's just that's the framework of a commission, is that we can't work on mutual documents. We can't do that. So I'm sorry, one person does have to be the person. If you don't want me to be it, someone else can do it. That's why I'm not doing anything nefarious. This is just what we have to do it this way. Someone else can do it. I would just give you everything. But
I think you're doing a fabulous job, Dr. Patterson. And I don't know if I'm going to raise a question. Are there ways to be able to have a conversation about open meeting laws and opportunities or changing the way in which a commission functions so that there would be access, so that people working on particular things have access to that? Is there a protocol or, a vote or how?
State law.
State law.
Yeah. Sorry.
Garrick has his hand up. Sorry.
Hello, can everyone hear me?
Yep.
I'm in the dark, but I'm at work. I want to thank everybody for their contributions to this discussion. I just wanted to pop in and say that I've also been trying to maintain that any type of subcommittee needs to go through the process. So I've been very upfront with saying that we cannot call what Marsha and myself and Usman are doing a subcommittee. We're just getting together. But also to make sure that we were, so that everyone had access to information. We recorded every one of our meetings. I don't know if Marsha mentioned that yet, but so, I do believe that information sharing is important, and I think this meeting here just shows that, we're all doing great work. We just are going to work on streamlining this process. Marissa and I have talked about it. We're going to get together. I want to thank everybody for their diligence in everything being done. And I say that because I unfortunately have to leave. I can't stay. I know it's only a few more minutes, but I'm at work and I have to go. But thank you, everybody, for your contribution.
Thanks, Garrick.
Just one thing I wanted to add was that, in the going back and forth process, it occurred to me that we needed to reach out to the planning department because Garrick, myself, and Usman were trying to figure out where the data is in the city. And I called Laura Kertzler. She suggested to me that a lot of the data resides and a lot of its analysis resides in the planning department. I have talked to the planning department. So what I'm going to try to do to be helpful is try to get the things that we need to put into structures. In this document is our chartering document. The city avails us of the city departments and so on to help us. That we can ask for the planning community, and I don't know if we could let them have the information or we can get from them the information, but we need to, if there's data that we're still looking for, they sent me to a website, which of course was easy enough because I was asking them about data, but I wanted a website that would give me the sort of the understanding of Northampton with the understanding of Florence and Leeds, a relationship to that, where are borders beginning and ending, you know, so we have total and complete clarity about that. Then can you produce for me where the most African American people live? Is that in most cities you can tell that. In this city we may not be able to, but let's start putting the basics in place for that conversation when we go to say, hey, we want to have a conversation for the community rollout to collect data. And I think, Sarah, you're mixing up information with process. I'm saying we need a process to do these things that everybody, what Nika just said, that everybody understands. And we're not, one person thinks one thing's going on, another person thinks another thing's going on. And I think that's what our committee is our proposed committee will be talking about. That makes sense.
It makes perfect sense. And the best thing I can do is in our next meeting, and if it's okay for me, I think I can send it out to everybody. I'll send out a detailed table of contents of the report that exists. As many people know, I've sent individual emails to people and I've said, hey, Bill, you've done this great job. Can you produce a section that talks about this thing? So I have solicited from other people. So I'll put out a detailed table of contents so people can see where their pieces fit in. I just also want to briefly mention that the work that Marsha, you just mentioned, I've been working on that. I don't think that there's any government apparatus for them to do it. That's why we are doing it. So I'm tracing all of our Black community members by ward across the 20th century on maps. And it's a lot of work. I've been doing it. So I wouldn't want anyone to reinvent the wheel that I've been doing. So that data will exist. Last point here, I have been using databases to find local, like socioeconomic information about our community members, like how much money have Black people made and where do they fit in the income. And those, there's not enough data that will allow that tool to give me data. So it says data unavailable. Whenever I select Black residents and socioeconomic ability or income, there's no data. So I will have a picture of the map with that statement, because that makes a point, right? We have tried to find Black people by income, by ward, and there are tools that produce this kind of stuff, but you can produce it for white residents here. You cannot produce it for Black people because there's a little statement that comes up that says insufficient data. So, yeah.
I just, and we're approaching 7 o'clock, but I guess I just want to say again, I'm going to talk to Attorney Seawald. My very specific, I would like to make 2 suggestions. My very specific question for him is going to be, what is the extent to which we can pursue individual points of interest? If it, if we're not designating formal subcommittees, because for sure, as soon as we say, definitely, we're calling this a subcommittee, that's going to be an open meeting. But my question for him is, if Bill and I have an interest in going to the Registry of Deeds and doing research together, that my instinct is that is not an open meeting law, but I will clarify that violation. I'll clarify that with Attorney Seawald. If I could propose a structure to kind of pull us together to move forward, it would be for us to identify, as long as Attorney Seawald says that's okay, for us to identify the things that we're working on. And then that way, it's not just an open, like, everybody report back on what you're doing, that we know, like, Marsha and Jeremy are going to report on things that they're looking into regarding the schools. And Bill and I are going to look into this, and maybe Garrick and I are going to report back about what we found out about the sort of mechanisms of municipal government. And then that way, that's all on the agenda about who's working on what. And then the next question is going to be, this is what's uncomfortable about this process, is that as we work through things and report back and share data with each other, that our ability to share it amongst ourselves, until and unless we have publicly shared that, we're circumscribed at that point until we've shared and posted it. But if we bring it to a meeting and we share it here, and we've done that, at that point in time, we can then post and leave things up.
You have to post it. So if I bring a detailed outline of our report, it has to be posted. And that's the thing, do we want a detailed outline posted in May for something that's gonna come out in August?
Well, I think that's a good question. I mean, I think there's going to be some amount of our working product that we won't want posted.
Exactly.
And I think that I think maybe if my suggestion might be for us to, again, sort of divvy up the work, make sure everybody knows what everybody else is working on, and so that we aren't duplicating effort, and that it's clear what the work product of whoever's working on that issue is going to be, both in terms of what they've learned and what they've researched, and then maybe recommendations. That's a suggestion for a framework, but for sure, it seems like we gotta know who's ponying up to look at what. And if the answer from Attorney Seawald is that we can't work together even informally, then we'll need to adjust to that. But it does seem like at a baseline, we need to know what each other are doing and make those reports back to the whole commission, like specified on the agenda, as opposed to kind of an open free-for-all.
I see. Yeah, I could do that. You have something?
So you couldn't have a shared Google Doc, or you couldn't deliberate outside of a public meeting in a document, or share something with your deliberation on a document, but you could share information that is going to be then brought to a meeting. You just can't deliberate about it.
So if someone shares information that gets discussed at a meeting, we don't have to publicly produce that for everybody. Is that what I'm hearing?
So I think Rachel had mentioned something about an article or something that she sent around, that she then was worried she'd made a mistake. She can share that. She can't share it and say, this is what I think we should do.
Okay.
So right. She can't deliberate or give an opinion even, but you can share information that you then will deliberate about in an open meeting.
And we don't have to publish what, for example, Rachel shared to the entire community?
No.
Perfect. So that means that we can share the report.
And we haven't violated anything.
I'd agree with that.
Okay.
It's the suggestion of a sort of a working Google Doc that multiple people have hands-on and are contributing to. That turns into deliberation.
Okay.
However, in subcommittees on the Northampton Policing Review Commission that I served on, we did work on a Google Doc in a meeting.
Okay.
And we only worked on it in the meeting, and it was publicly available. Everyone could see what we were editing, and that kind of open collaboration can be permitted, but you can't work on it outside of the meeting.
Marcia, I hope you're getting this, because this would be great points for the one-pager that you just talked about.
I'm listening very intently, Sarah.
That was a positive statement.
I'm sorry, I have another meeting to get to. Thanks so much for inviting me, and I'm always happy to discuss with any of you individually as well how things are going or how I can support the commission.
Thank you so much, and we will be meeting soon so that we can say thank you to our mayor too.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you so much.
I know we're over our time, but I would like this observation to be included in the minutes. I agree with Marcia. Not only are persons who are students in Northampton part of the charge from the City Council, but persons who have been students in Northampton, who have been residents, who have been employed here, all are within our charge. And in that regard, I think that one place we need to look, not because we are going to have any kind of a conclusion about this, but we need to look at Smith College. And we need to be clear, I think, on what Smith has or hasn't done with regard to this exact topic of reparations and what has been done there. And that is a matter of significant interest to me, and I would like to actually see what there is in the Smith Archives, which is open to the public, to see where that takes us. And this commission is not going to get to a place where it says Northampton should do X, Y, or Z with regard to Smith on this topic. But I think we should, in fact, say, we've looked at it, and preliminarily, here's what we know. And I think that's an appropriate part of the report, and whether it's part of this subcommittee on schools or whether it's another couple of us to look at that, I think that we should make that part of our work.
I'd like to open the floor for the last minute or two from to anyone in the public comments. So Dan Kennedy or Carolyn, or because I know Dan Kennedy worked on the Police Review Commission. If you have any sort of tips that might come after hearing our discussion, I hope you feel free that to speak in this last minute or two. Okay, so I'm going to make a motion that.
Can I?
Oh,
I'm so sorry, and I don't mean to overstep. I just. Correct me if I misheard this, but I, particularly since we've spent a good amount of time tonight talking about documenting identity and sort of the danger and the problem of erasing identities, particularly people of color, I think I heard it said that there's no administrators who are Black in the Northampton schools, and I would not, I don't feel right about not acknowledging the fact that our superintendent of schools is a Black woman. And I just want to make sure that people know that and know that her name's Dr. Portia Bonner, and she is, we do in fact have, our head administrator is a Black woman.
I think that's great. I just wanted to mention that I mentioned something about there being no colored schools, but that was totally about the 19th century.
Oh, no, it was a different comment when, about administration, I think.
Yes, we're very excited. And there was a whole session for City Council devoted to the school, right? I attended a session where you introduced our new superintendent and some of the other people.
I might have misheard it. I just thought it was said earlier that there were not administrators who are, there's no one in the administration who is Black, which is not accurate.
I make a motion for,
Jeremy's ready.
Oh, yeah, to answer that question, I think what me and Martha were saying, no African American administration at specifically the Northampton High School, not the whole entire district in general. At Northampton High School, there are no people of color who are in the administrative positions of vice principal, or any other sort of administrative group.
That is true.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Could you do the roll call? Thanks.
Sorry, let me find the.
Yes.
Bill Newman. Alicia Lundquist. Garrick's left. Jeremy Baker Paquette.
Yes.
I vote yes. Marcia Morris. I guess Marcia's not going to adjourn.
Abstain.
Sorry, I said yes. I didn't realize I was muted. Yes.
No, that's okay. Renika Montgomery Tomaclo.
Yes.
Sarah Lynn Patterson.
Yes.
Rachel Naismith.
Yes.
Thank y'all.
Wonderful meeting. See you guys next month.
I have a question. If
Yeah.
that motion